The smell of burnt coffee hung heavy in the air like a storm cloud, darkening the edges of my world. There was a place I knew too well, its worn-out chairs creaking with each shift in weight as customers came and went. It had become my refuge, a sanctuary between deadlines and broken relationships. As I stared into the bitter depths of my cold brew, I couldn't help but think of Daniel. He used to be my favorite person here, until he became my least favorite. We were so different, yet somehow intertwined like the tangled roots of an ancient oak tree. Daniel was a chef, wild and untamed as the spices he worked with. His hands moved like they had a mind of their own, crafting dishes that left customers breathless. But there was something darker about him, something that drew people in despite the danger it posed. Our lives were vastly different, yet so incredibly similar. We both sought to master our crafts, to leave a mark on this world that would last long after we were gone. For me, it was through my words. I was a journalist, seeking truth and beauty hidden beneath layers of paint and pretense. For Daniel, his passion lay in the flames that licked at his food, an ungodly power he wielded with a precision that bordered on sacrilege. Our paths crossed like two opposing winds, each trying to tear down the other's resolve. The sound of the door swinging open broke my reverie. A gust of wind swept in, carrying with it the scent of rain and uncertainty. I glanced up, expecting to see one of our usual patrons. Instead, a stranger stood there, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something or someone. He moved towards Daniel without hesitation, his gaze never wavering from that point on the other side of the room. They exchanged words, their conversation too hushed for me to make out. But I could feel it, an electric tension that crackled like the first spark of lightning before a storm. As their voices rose, mine fell silent. The air between them seemed charged with ancient prophecies and forgotten myths, and as much as I wished to turn away, my eyes remained glued to the unfolding drama in front of me. The stranger's hand shot out towards Daniel, who jerked back as if struck by a bolt of lightning. His eyes widened in shock, then something flickered within them, a spark of dark power that sent shivers down my spine. In an instant, their connection was forged in fire and blood. I didn't know what had just happened, but I knew one thing for certain. My world would never be the same again. The echoes of their confrontation lingered in the air like a specter, haunting every corner of the. I tried to process what had just happened, but my mind was a jumbled mess of fragmented images and half-remembered phrases. Daniel's eyes, wild with an emotion I couldn't quite place, met mine briefly before he stormed out of the. The stranger remained still for a moment, as if savoring the aftermath of his actions. As the door swung shut behind him, the stranger turned to me. His gaze was unsettlingly calm, but I could sense an undercurrent of tension coiled within him like a snake ready to strike. "Forgive my intrusion," he said in a voice that carried the weight of countless secrets. I nodded, still trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had just swept through our lives. "It's okay." He approached me slowly, each step deliberate and measured. The air seemed to thicken around us as if reality itself was holding its breath. "I'm looking for someone," he continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "Someone with a certain spark within them, someone who can understand the true nature of power." The words sent shivers down my spine. There was something hypnotic about his voice, like an incantation meant to draw me into a world I didn't fully comprehend. "Are you that person?" he asked, leaning in closer until our faces were only inches apart. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my heart from leaping out of my chest. "No," I replied, though part of me wondered if there was some truth hidden within those three little letters. The stranger's gaze lingered on me for a moment longer before he straightened up and stepped back. He seemed disappointed but not surprised. "Then you must know someone who is." I nodded hesitantly, unsure where this chance encounter would lead or what its consequences might be. "Daniel," I said softly, almost afraid to speak his name aloud. A small smile played on the stranger's lips as he turned towards the door. "Tell him he owes me a favor," he called out before disappearing into the stormy night. As the door shut behind him, I couldn't help but feel like my world was spinning out of control. The familiar comfort of the worn-out chairs and burnt coffee seemed to vanish with each passing moment. All that remained was uncertainty, a bitter brew of emotions swirling within me, refusing to settle into anything resembling clarity. I stared down at my cold brew, now warm from the turbulent events surrounding me. It was time for a new chapter in this story of ours, one filled with darkness and untold potential. Little did I know that these shattered echoes were only the beginning, the first whispers of a storm that would soon reshape our lives forever. The rain poured down, relentless and unforgiving as I sat in stunned silence, lost within the labyrinth of my thoughts. The stranger's words echoed in my mind, haunting me like a specter that refused to be exorcised. Daniel owed him a favor. What kind of favor could one man possibly owe another? I glanced around the empty, searching for some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos swirling within and without. But nothing seemed right anymore, not even this once safe sanctuary. My phone buzzed suddenly, shrill in the oppressive stillness. I hesitated for a moment before answering, wondering if I was ready to face whatever lay on the other end. "Hello," my voice trembled slightly as it emerged from my throat. "Sarah," came Daniel's voice, laced with an unfamiliar edge that sent shivers down my spine. "We need to talk." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his sudden interest in communication, especially after the way he had stormed out of here earlier. "About?" I asked cautiously, my mind racing with possibilities. "The stranger. He was right," Daniel said, interrupting me before I could finish my question. His words hung in the air like a challenge. I frowned, unsure how to respond. "Right about what?" For a moment there was silence on his end of the line as well. Then he sighed heavily. "About power, about us." My heart skipped a beat at those words. Us. There was no us anymore, not in the way we used to be anyway. "What do you mean?" I asked tentatively, trying to grasp onto any thread of understanding that might lead me out of this darkness. I can't explain it all right now," Daniel continued, his voice a strange mixture of frustration and urgency. "But you need to know whatever happens next, it involves you too." My stomach twisted into knots as the implications of those words sank in. Involved? In what? And why? Just when I thought I had found some semblance of answers, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, willing him to call back or provide some form of closure. But there was nothing. I set down my phone on the table beside me, feeling as though everything around me had become a fragile, crumbling construct on the verge of collapse. What did this stranger want from us? And why did Daniel suddenly seem so entangled in his mysterious affairs? As I sat there, lost in the murky waters of uncertainty, the rain outside seemed to grow heavier, drumming against the roof like an ominous warning. This was only the beginning, a gathering storm that threatened to tear down everything we knew and rebuild it into something unrecognizable. The question was, were we strong enough to withstand its fury? The rain drummed against the roof relentlessly, each drop echoing my own racing heart. I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours before finally snapping out of my daze. My phone still lay on the table beside me, its screen a cold reminder that Daniel's abrupt departure had been all too real. I couldn't sit there anymore, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. It was time to take action, or at least, try to make sense of this new reality that seemed to have descended upon our lives like a thick fog. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed Daniel's number, hoping against hope that he would answer. The line rang several times before his voice finally crackled through. "Sarah, what is it?" I don't know where to start," I admitted, trying to keep my composure intact despite the turmoil brewing inside me. "You hung up on me." "Sarah, listen," Daniel began, but I cut him off. "No, you listen. You say there's something going on with this stranger and it involves me too. What does that even mean?" There was a pause on his end of the line before he sighed heavily. "I don't know everything yet either, but whatever it is, it's dangerous." That word sent shivers down my spine despite the warmth of the around me. Dangerous. This stranger and whatever power he wielded, were we really prepared to face such a threat? "I need to see you," Daniel continued after a moment, his voice resolute. "Come to my place. We'll figure this out together." I hesitated for only a moment before nodding, as if he could actually see me through the phone line. "Okay, I'm on my way." The rain outside may have been relentless, but it couldn't hold a candle to the turmoil brewing within me as I made my way towards Daniel's apartment. The short walk felt like an eternity, each step heavy with unspoken questions and fears. When I finally arrived at his door, my hand hesitated over the handle for a moment before I pushed it open and stepped inside. The apartment was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls as if they too were trying to escape the storm raging outside. Daniel stood by the window, gazing out into the tempestuous night with an expression that was both hauntingly beautiful and terrifyingly dark. When he turned to face me, I could see a flicker of something in his eyes, a spark of that same power that had once fascinated me so much, now twisted and warped beyond recognition. "Sarah," he said softly, as if trying out the sound of my name for the first time in years. "I'm sorry." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his apology after everything we had been through. "For what?" "For not being honest with you sooner, for keeping secrets from you." Daniel's gaze dropped to the ground before he looked up again, meeting my eyes without flinching. "I never meant for any of this to happen." The weight of his words hung in the air like a challenge. What had happened, and what lay ahead? Before I could question him further, the wind outside seemed to grow even more furious, as if nature itself was trying to warn us about the storm that awaited us. "Sarah," Daniel said again, this time with an urgency that sent my heart racing. "We need to leave now." I followed his gaze out the window just in time to see a bolt of lightning split the darkened sky, illuminating our apartment complex for a brief moment before plunging everything back into darkness. The thunder that followed was deafening, shaking the very foundations of the building. "What's happening?" I shouted over the cacophony, my voice barely audible above the storm. Daniel grabbed my hand without hesitation, pulling me towards the door. "We need to get out of here now." As we stepped into the torrential rain, the whirlwind of change enveloping us seemed only to grow stronger with each passing moment. The question was, would we be able to survive this tempest that threatened not just our lives, but the very fabric of reality itself? The rain stung like needles against my skin as we dashed through the chaotic night, Daniel's firm grip on my hand the only anchor amidst the turmoil. We moved without a clear destination in mind, guided solely by instinct and the desperate need to escape whatever fate awaited us within those four walls. As we finally reached our cars parked outside, I couldn't help but notice that the world around us had transformed into something unrecognizable. The once familiar streets now seemed distorted and menacing, as if they too were caught in the grip of this supernatural storm. Daniel led me to his car, fumbling with the keys while rain poured down on our heads like a relentless waterfall. With shaking hands, he managed to unlock the door, urging me inside just as the first crack of thunder shook the ground beneath us. As we sped away from the apartment complex, leaving behind the haunting shadows that had taken up residence within its walls, my mind raced with questions and fears. The wind howled around us like a chorus of restless spirits, each gust more violent than the last. "Where are we going?" I shouted over the cacophony, my voice barely audible even to myself amidst the storm's fury. Daniel gripped the steering wheel with a white-knuckled intensity that mirrored my own. "Somewhere safe," he replied, though his expression told me he had no clearer idea than I did what that might look like in this ever-changing world. The car skidded around a corner, tires screeching against the wet asphalt. The force of the turn threw us both off balance, our bodies slamming into the seats with an almost violent force. But we didn't stop. We couldn't stop. As the storm raged on outside, mirroring the tempest brewing within me, I noticed something strange in the mirror, a figure lurking just out of sight, partially obscured by the torrential rain. "Daniel," I gasped, pointing towards the reflection. "There's someone following us." He didn't hesitate. His foot pressed down harder on the accelerator, urging our vehicle forward as if fleeing from some unseen doom. The stranger, whoever he was, clung to us like an unwanted shadow, refusing to be shaken. We drove through darkened streets that seemed to shift and twist around us, becoming unrecognizable even from one moment to the next. Our journey had no clear path or destination, yet we continued onward as if propelled by some unseen force, a desperate search for answers buried deep within this stormy labyrinth of reality. As we sped along the rain-soaked roads, I couldn't help but feel that our lives were unraveling before us like loose threads pulled from a tapestry. The familiar had given way to chaos. All that remained was uncertainty and the unrelenting wind that whipped at my face. And yet, amidst this whirlwind of change, there was something that tied me to Daniel, a fragile thread of hope, however faint it might seem. Together, we plunged forward into the unknown, driven by the primal urge to survive against all odds. The storm raged on around us, its fury unrelenting as our lives careened down paths we never could have imagined. But in those moments of sheer terror and unbreakable resolve, I found something that I had thought lost forever, a connection with another human being that went far beyond words or rational understanding. We might not know where this journey would lead us, but one thing was clear. As long as we faced it together, there was always a chance to find our way through the darkest of storms. The car tore through the night, leaving a trail of chaos in its wake as we fled from the shadow that clung to us like a relentless specter. Rain lashed at our vehicle, threatening to consume it whole amidst this tempestuous nightmare. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel was fierce and unyielding, his eyes fixed intently on the road ahead, as if willing us towards safety with every ounce of strength he possessed. I clung to him just as tightly, my heart pounding against my chest like a wild animal trying to break free. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we turned onto a familiar street, or at least, it looked vaguely similar to how I remembered it. The storm raged on outside, but there was something almost comforting about the familiarity of this place, no matter how distorted it might seem in the turbulent waters of our current reality. Daniel pulled into his driveway, parking the car with a sudden jerk that sent both of us forward against our. He didn't bother to turn off the engine. Instead, he reached out and took my hand again, urging me towards the house as if our lives depended on it. We stumbled inside, leaving behind the tempestuous world outside for the momentary safety of his home. The air was thick with dampness and the lingering scent of burnt coffee, a bitter reminder of the life we had left behind only hours before. As Daniel locked the door behind us, a sense of uneasy calm fell over me like a thin veil drawn across the chaos that churned beneath its surface. We were safe for the moment, but how long could this fragile respite last in the face of whatever darkness loomed beyond these walls? "Sarah," Daniel said softly, turning towards me with an expression I couldn't quite read, "we need to talk about what just happened." I nodded, my heart still pounding like a drum against mine. We sat down on the couch together, our bodies pressed close in this tiny island of stability amidst the stormy seas that threatened to engulf us. "I know you have questions," he began hesitantly, his voice raw from fear and uncertainty. "But I need you to trust me first, trust that whatever is happening, we'll face it together." I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice in the midst of this whirlwind. What do you mean? What's going on with that stranger? Daniel sighed heavily, running a hand through his damp hair as if attempting to ward off the memories of the storm outside. His name is, and he believes I possess some kind of power. My eyes widened in shock at those words, even as part of me had begun to suspect something similar. Power? What do you mean? It's hard to explain, Daniel replied, his gaze faltering for a moment before regaining its usual intensity. But I think it has something to do with the way I cook, the flames, the heat. It might sound crazy, but seems to believe that it could be harnessed into something dangerous. I absorbed those words slowly, letting them sink into my mind like heavy stones. Dangerous power. Was that what we were running from? So why is he after us? I asked tentatively, trying to grasp onto any thread of understanding that might lead me out of this darkness. Daniel's expression darkened, as if a shadow had passed over his face, even in the midst of this dimly lit room. He says there's a prophecy, something about a pair who could wield power beyond imagination. I frowned, trying to make sense of those words. A pair. Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. You and me, Sarah. I know it sounds crazy, but according to, we're the key to unlocking this power together. The room seemed to spin around us as the implications of those words sank in like a cold, dark well with no end in sight. We were connected, not just by circumstance or past experiences, but by something far deeper and more terrifying than either of us had ever imagined. Our lives hung on the precipice of change, teetering between two worlds that threatened to collide at any moment. But in this fragile sanctuary, surrounded by the remnants of a life we once knew, there was something that flickered within me, a spark of hope, however faint it might seem, as long as I had Daniel by my side. Together, we would face whatever storms lay ahead, armed with nothing but our unbreakable bond and the determination to uncover the truth hidden beneath layers of uncertainty. For in the midst of this chaos, one thing was clear. Our lives were intertwined like the threads of a tapestry, waiting to be woven into something beautiful or monstrous, depending on what choice we made next. The storm raged on outside, its fury unrelenting as our destinies hung in the balance. But within those walls, amidst the lingering scent of burnt coffee and the haunting shadows of memories, we found something that neither of us ever thought we would, a chance to redefine the very fabric of reality itself. And so we stood at the precipice of change, ready to face whatever lay ahead with open hearts and unbreakable resolve. For in the end, it wasn't just about surviving this storm. It was about embracing its power and shaping our destinies into something worth fighting for together.